It's difficult to put my finger on a key inspiration, a key concept for that work because the way that I create work is very process driven. I never have any idea how the work is going to end up. So I have general things that I explore and I'm interested in that are relevant at the time or the place that I'm working in. But how it's going to manifest, I don't know at the time. However, with this work in particular, what it ended up becoming was sort of a chrysalis or a metaphor for change in the cycle of life, and that idea of life and death and transformation and growth. And it's very much about the process of existing on this planet, be it in the natural world or be it as human beings, which is a topic that I explore in all my work. I guess to answer this question about the concept I'm trying to communicate, I sort of need to go back to basics. I began creating work as an artist because I used to be a professional athlete and I was trying to deal with missing out on 2 Olympics and that loss and trauma. And I found a way through art to cope with that. And I began by depicting scenes and moments and memories from that experience and painting it quite literally, painting the body quite literally. But I found this didn't give me the adrenaline rush and the competitive thing that I had lost from training and competing. And what I found was that if I started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and moving out of the studio and using my body as a tool rather than painting my body literally. And what I found was that it became more of a universal sort of exploration on the, I guess, the existence and challenge between man and nature and how we're always trying to control and manipulate one and the other. And I found sort of a very performative, visceral, emotional and personal process that was very cathartic, and it sort of is what keeps me sane. So it's kind of like my process is more important to me than the actual outcome of the work, which is why I don't know what's going to happen when I make it. Basically what I've found is that perhaps because I spent so long pitting my body against nature and being experimented on and tested and pushing it to the limits and me versus the mountain and the clock and so on and so forth, I ended up becoming really obsessed with the sublime. They talk about this in art aesthetics. And it's like when you look upon say, the Austrian Alps or something like that, or a vast ocean or the Australian desert, it's not beautiful, it's also terrifying at the same time. And so that's what makes it so awesome, and that is what they call the sublime in art. So I'm constantly trying to find that schism between the two and push that, because that's what life is about. It's not all roses, it's dark, it's light, it's life, it's death, it's beauty, it's horror, it's survival, it's decay, it's hard, it's fun. Do you know what I mean? You need one to appreciate the other, and so I'm constantly trying to play those two against each other and find that I enjoy pushing the limits of the two and finding the fusion between them. Oh, as for techniques, I suppose I sort of touched on that earlier when I was talking about using my body as a tool. So what happened was I started moving out into the landscape, and the works got bigger and bigger and bigger, and to the point where when I'm out in the desert, they seem really small, and it's not until I get them back into the gallery that I realise how massive they are. But it's kind of like I need to be inside the work, so there's no boundaries, there's no edges. I'm just making a very emotional, psychological exploration into my internal landscape, the external landscape, past, present, my personal history, the universal, and I'm just sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It's a very unconscious, instinctual process. And what happens is I love working. I can't work in a studio because it's very contained and controlled. What I love about being outside is there's this risk and unknown. So I sleep out in the desert in a swag for weeks at a time with the works, and they get rained on, they get washed away. When I was doing a residency in Austria, we got taken out by avalanches. I've been caught in bushfires, in snowstorms, I worked in the dark black catacombs of Paris and the back streets of Berlin, and I just like being in the place, if that makes sense. So all the local soil gets into it. I don't use paint, colours, I use the local pigment, so I can always tell from a work where it's been created by the colour and the tone of it and the feel of it. So, and you know, like in the snow, that affects the way the pigments and materials seep into the canvas or don't seep into the canvas or freeze, and in the desert the way they melt, or if I go to throw some paint over there's a gust of wind and it goes over there and I have to cope with it and deal with it and turn it into something else that I wasn't expecting. So I get that adrenaline rush and that excitement that I missed from being an athlete. So it's it's an exciting, visceral, sort of violent, I guess, process. But then there's long periods of meditation where I just sit and think and concentrate and process, and then it's slow, and then it speeds up, and then it's, I attack it, and then I meditate, and I really enjoy that process. And I don't use brushes, I use trees. So the local sort of trees I sort of bind them together and the leaves and use those, and the leaves end up getting in the work. I use bones to draw with, burnt trees for charcoal, bones or whatever's around in the environment end up in the work. Animals end up sort of moving through them at night. So it's quite, I guess nature in a way is just as much the artist as I am.